If you have ever tried to connect the remote control for the Mittled light to the power supply, you know how a frustrating experience that can be because it's not always working. So in this video, I want to share with you how you can do that in a few easy steps, and it doesn't matter whether you have 1, 2, or even more power supplies. It will always work. So let's get started. Before we get started, we need to prepare the remote, and that is basically just a fancy way of saying we have to put in a battery. So you take the remote out of the box and you open it up with something flat or pointy, and then you simply put in a AAA battery right in the back. Remember to keep an eye out for the plus and minus, otherwise it will not work. Do not put the cover on at this point, because we need the remote to be open when we are pairing it with a power supply. Next up is resetting the power supply. Whether you have 1, 2, and 3, you reset them in the exact same manner. To do so, we need a very pointy tool, and that is called an owl or awl, depending on where you're at. It's not this one. No, it's a very pointy tool, and then we find the hole on the power supply and we press that pointy tool right in there and give it a firm press for a second or two, and then you will see the light will start flickering. And that is to indicate that the power supply is now in reset mode. So give it a few seconds, sometimes a bit longer. After a while, it will be ready to receive the signal that you will transmit from the remote control. To make it really easy, we start with just one power supply and the power cable. If you're in North America, the power cable will look like this, but if you are in another region, it might look different. Start by connecting the power supply to your power outlet, and there has to be light in the lights now, and if there's not, check this switch that sits on the power cable to see if it might be turned off. And now you bring your fully prepared remote control over to the vicinity of the power supply, and you press that little button there on the back for about 10 seconds, and you will see the light will start go up and down in power. And that indicates that the power supply now is being connected to the remote control. And when the light becomes steady, that means the remote has been connected to the power supply. And you can test it by turning it on and off, and you can also try to dim the light by push and hold the 0 on the remote control. And by push and holding the other end of the remote control, you will bring up the light again. If your kitchen lighting setup has more than one power supply, the pairing of the remote is done in the same way, but there's some precautions you need to take depending on how close the power supplies are sitting to each other. If they are sitting with some distance apart where the remote control cannot have an impact on more than one power supply at a time, you can just go ahead and pair them individually, just like we just did with one power supply. But if they're sitting really close to each other, you need to do it a little bit differently. So we will look at that now. If the power supplies have separate power cables, it's really easy because you can treat them as two individuals and do the pairing twice. If you have power to both of them at the same time, you might pair the remote control with the same power supply twice, and we don't want to do that. So turn one on at a time and pair the remote with the power supply like I just showed you. And when the first power supply has been paired with the remote, turn that one off and turn on the other one and do the exact same thing again. Now both of those power supplies are connected to the same remote, and you can control all the light with only one remote. Depending on what specific cables are in your order, you can have the intermediate cable between the power supplies. So one power supply is feeding the other. I'm only mentioning this because it is important to remember that that switch has to be on to provide power for group B. Otherwise, there's no power for group A when you want to pair the remote with that power supply. If the power supplies are sitting back to back, we need to do something differently. Since the power for group A is depending on that the group B is turned on, we cannot just unplug group B. So the first thing we want to do is to disconnect light group A by unplugging one of the end of that intermediate cable. Doesn't matter which one, just unplug it. And now there's no power for light group A, and you can pair your remote with light group B. When that has been completed, you unplug your power cable from light group B's power supply and connect it into the power supply of light group A. And then, guess what? We're pairing again. You take your remote and you pair your remote with the power supply for light group A. And since the power supply for light group B is unpowered, the pairing between the remote control and light group B will not be disturbed. And when all this is done, you reconnect your power cables just as they were to begin with. And now you can again control all your kitchen light with one remote. If I should compress a bit, the message from this video should be that make sure that you only have power for the one power supply that you want to pair with the remote. Then you are on track for success. And before I send you off to do better things than watching these videos, I can recommend more of it. So check these out as well.